week 18. The NFL called it the greatest season ever, and it's because of an extra game, a 17th game, 18th week of the season, and it brings the Bears back to Minnesota. Jeff Joniak, Tom Thayer, and our Bears preview, wrapping up the 2021, /2022 season, Tom. Is it still weird to hear an 18th week and a 17th game? Because it is weird for me.
It is weird in terms of the NFL. In the USFL, we did play 18 games, so I am used to that type of routine. But, you know, I'm actually looking forward to the game, and I'm glad it's in a perfect setting like Minnesota, because I don't want the players to come out of the locker room thinking about the cold. I want them to think about how well they should play, they can play, and how to wrap this thing up.
Yeah, I think these guys with their mindset, it's been so good here in the last few weeks. Honestly, I think they'd be ready to play this game no matter what. And Justin Fields would be the starting quarterback. And it would be a great platform and a bounce into 2022 and the season and the off season and all the work he's going to do to improve his skill set. I just think it would be really important to have a nice, solid offensive game for Justin Fields and the rest of the unit.
You know, Jeff, any video evidence that you could put on tape and give you a chance to study in the off season, I do think it benefits you in the long run. You wish circumstances were different, that the Bears were playing it for a playoff race or in the playoffs already. However, when you look at the future of Justin Fields and the Bears organization, I think every minute you get is, like I said, is beneficial to the team.
Vikings are the usual host for the Bears in the final regular season game, and the Bears have played a lot of spoiler roles against the Vikings. No playoff hopes for them either this year. Really wrapped by the Packers the other night. Sean Mannion and the offense couldn't get much started against the Packers, who were just dominant at home. The Vikings now have not been over 500, Tom. Believe it or not, since 2019, late in the season, they have been under a 500 team throughout the course of this entire time. That's got to lead to a lot of frustration there as well, and something the Bears hope to take advantage of.
When you look at the Minnesota Vikings and, you know, the commitment they made to Kirk Cousins over time, some of the veterans they got rid of in the last couple of years, it seems like every time they're on the cusp of doing something good, they start a rebuilding process, either on the offensive line or on the defensive side of the ball. In Mike Zimmer as a defensive-minded head coach, and I think there's higher expectations to what this defense was capable of doing inside the division. They did beat Green Bay a couple weeks ago, but you know, when you have COVID interruptions, uncertainty in your lineup, and other injury issues, you know, the Vikings have faced an uphill battle.
Kind of a different game than the one just a few weeks ago. The Bears were really shorthanded, Tom. They had no defensive backs in a starting role. They had a bunch of guys just being put in roles by Sean Desai, and they did a very nice job overall on defending the Vikings, limiting the impact of Dalvin Cook and limiting the impact of Justin Jefferson. That'll be the task again, but they're going to be back to full strength pretty much for this game against the Vikings. So for Minnesota, a bit of a different taste of the Bears' aggressive defense that produced 4 sacks and 4 turnovers last week.
Sean Desai did a nice job of moving personnel around and trying to put them in the best place, even though there was uncertainty about guys like Thomas Graham. So I will hope the Bears come out of the locker room and play with the same enthusiasm they did a couple of weeks ago against the Minnesota Vikings. You always have to stop Dalvin Cook. He's one of the best running backs in the National Football League. But I think when you look at a guy like David Montgomery, he's got to be considered up there with some of the most physical and, you know, well-rounded running backs in the National Football League also.
Yes, he had a bunch of yards after contact last week. In fact, the last couple weeks, they've stuck to the ground game, and what he does is lean forward and get what he can. He keeps turning those legs. The offensive linemen are helping him out, pushing the pile. So we've seen a lot of scrum runs, as we like to say, because it's a lot of bodies trying to get to the ball, put a hat on a hat, and just push and pull and plug. And that's exactly what he's been doing, grinding out yards for the Bears offense.
So I guess, Jeff, you know, one thing that we need to talk about, if Dave Montgomery is healthy, but so is Justin Fields, where would you like to see this game plan go in the last week of the season? Would you like to see Justin Fields get more involved with the wide receiver position and the tight end position and even catches for the backs out of the backfield? Or, like me, I'm always a ground and pound type of guy. However, I may change my way of thinking this last week, Jeff, and I would like to see Justin throw it up a couple more times.
Well, you got Darnell Mooney really in a takeoff season. I think we all would agree that out of all the offensive players, a case could be made. He's grown the fastest here in 2021-22 because he has become the number one receiver, well over 100 targets, big plays, big chunk plays. Another touchdown last week on a really good throw by Andy Dalton. But an emerging threat for the Bears and a very creative, as you like to say, a creative route runner.
He is, like we've said it a number of times, with the ball in his hands, he's probably the most creative runner the Bears have. He's super courageous over the middle. He has got great determination that he put on display even in Seattle under some poor conditions. So yeah, I like to see the continued growth of Darnell Mooney, but there's a lot of other young pieces in place like the David Montgomery and the Khalil Herbert and the Cole Kmet. Some of these other young guys on the exterior that are going to have to continue to develop.
The one thing against the Vikings, there's two things they do extremely well on the defensive side of the ball. A, they do get sacks, and DJ Wanham had a heck of a game a couple of weeks ago against the Bears with 8 tackles and 3 sacks. So stopping him will be important, and they're great on third down. That has been the MO of this team. Regardless if they're winning or losing, they are a threat on third down because they can get creative on third down with their blitz packages. COVID affecting them, Tom, certainly on their offensive line. We'll touch on that in just a moment, but Kendricks may not be able to play for this game. He's on the COVID-19 list, but Harrison Smith will always be somebody you got to circle and somebody you got to block.
You know, Harrison Smith is such a leader from the defensive backfield all the way to the line of scrimmage. He's the type of guy that you could put the communication device in his helmet and he could call every defense, make sure everybody's lined up in the right place. It's all about the game planning for the Chicago Bears because they know there's going to be 11 guys across the ball. How can you put your players in the most efficient position out there for this last week of NFL football?
All right, let's look at the Vikings offense. Kirk Cousins on the COVID last week, he could not play for Green Bay, so that was Sean Mannion. Or are they going to go to a rookie quarterback in Kellen Mond? We saw 3 pass attempts his last game and 2 completions. That was it, just 1 series. But their offensive line is an issue right now. 3 players, 3 starters, both tackles, and a starting guard on the COVID list. Again, because of the new NFLPA, NFL rules in terms of their agreement, whether those guys can be back and ready to go is in question. But that really erodes, some really good talented players on the offensive line. Opportunity then exists for guys up front, guys like Robert Quinn and guys like Trevis Gibson. Boy, did he turn our heads. Think about it. On 3 pass rushes, gets 2 big sacks. The second one maybe was more fantastic than the first one when it was a 0 blitz and he was unblocked, and 2 forced fumbles. That's getting good production out of minimal reps in the passing game.
This is exactly what you want him to be able to capitalize on. The opportunity to play a majority of the snaps because of the injury to the Khalil Mack and then being productive because of it. So I'm excited to see, depending upon the offensive line scenario in Minnesota, that the defense plays like we've known they're capable of playing all season long.
Would love to see Quinn be the NFL sack leader. And heck, his story, you can't tell it enough. You can't be more happy for a guy that is so respected in that locker room. Grinded, worked hard all year, gives relentless effort in practice and on the game day field. He is the biggest story, in my opinion, of the 2021 season for the Chicago Bears.
I agree. But the unique thing about Robert Quinn is the other players on the line of scrimmage that he incorporated in his sacks. The way he took advantage of veteran offensive tackles as well as rookie offensive tackles. That was not the determining factor on how successful he was going to be week in and week out. And I just think it's his overall work ethic. We all got to be impressed with the effort that Robert Quinn put out there to help the Bears as a team, but also to help his own cause. And I'm super impressed with everything he's done throughout his career.
And lastly, I got to give a tip of the cap to Eddie Jackson. He's been pouring it on here the last few weeks. He had a really strong game. Looks to be a re-energized player, reinvigorated the way he's playing, the way he was hitting, the way he loves playing near the line of scrimmage. And Eddie Jackson may have a different role again this game against the Vikings. You got to figure out a way to keep Justin Jefferson quiet, a 1,500-yard receiver for the Minnesota Vikings. Jalen Johnson will surely draw him, but help from Eddie Jackson and the safeties will be important.
He's a heck of a football player. But, when you look at Eddie Jackson in the Giants game and the way he was communicating all assignments amongst all the defensive backs and the linebackers, I think he plays an important role. And I'm glad Sean Desai was able to kind of look back at and use his creativity in making sure that all these guys are put in the right place to be the most effective. Once they knew that it was a run-heavy game plan for the New York Giants, he took Eddie Jackson towards the line of scrimmage and said, hey, be a playmaker from 3 yards off the ball.
Bears, and hopefully Justin Fields at starting quarterback against the Vikings. That'll do it for us. Appreciate you watching all season long. We've enjoyed telling you at least the stories and the context of the matchups the Bears have had, of course, across the season. We'll continue to talk to you throughout the offseason, I'm sure, as well. For Tom Thayer, I'm Jeff Joniak. Thanks for watching, everybody.